They were built to heal, but some hospitals in Canada never let go of the pain. Inside their abandoned halls, something lingers. Not just memories, not just history, something cold, watching. These are places where patients still cry out long after death, where the lights flicker with no power, where footsteps echo in rooms that should be empty. Tonight, we step into 15 of the most haunted hospitals in Canada. Some were shut down, others still operate, and in every one of them, something stayed behind. If you decide to visit, just remember, not every patient left alive, and not every spirit likes being disturbed. Canada's medical history goes back centuries, from early field hospitals during wartime to large psychiatric institutions that operated in silence. The country has seen its share of places meant for healing and suffering. Many of these hospitals were built in isolation, small towns, deep woods, far from watchful eyes. Overcrowding, underfunding, and cruel treatments turned some of them into places of horror rather than hope. Electroshock therapy, cold water immersions, forced lobotomies, solitary confinement. These were not rare, they were policy, and when patients died, they didn't always get a name. Some were buried in unmarked graves just steps from the buildings. Others were left behind entirely when facilities shut their doors. Now, decades later, the walls are still standing, and so are the voices. Staff, visitors, and investigators have reported cold spots, full apparitions, whispering through vents, and the sudden feeling of being watched from behind closed doors. Some say they've seen wheelchairs moving on their own. Others refuse to go back after hearing screaming echo through empty wings. This is not fiction. These are real locations, real records, real reports, and if you're brave enough to keep watching, it's time to enter the first one. Haunted Hospital. Number 1. Riverview Hospital, Coquitlam, British Columbia. Once one of the largest psychiatric hospitals in Canada, Riverview Hospital opened in 1913 and operated for nearly a century. At its peak, it housed thousands of patients suffering from various mental illnesses. Over the years, stories began to surface, not just of medical mistreatment, but of something darker growing within its walls. Some say the building itself absorbed the trauma. After it was decommissioned, film crews began using the site for horror and thriller productions. Many came prepared to be spooked by the atmosphere. Few expected what actually happened. One cameraman reported hearing footsteps behind him in an empty hallway, followed by the sound of an old gurney being pushed, but when he turned around there was no one there. Just the metal squeak, slowly fading down the hall. Security guards who patrol the remaining structures speak of lights turning on in rooms without power or screams coming from the upper floors when no one else is inside, and of doors slamming, not from the wind, but as if someone is running. An investigator once spent a night inside Crease Clinic, one of Riverview's most active wings. Around 3 a.m., his thermal camera picked up the shape of a human figure pacing in a hallway. When he approached, the temperature dropped by nearly 10 degrees. The figure disappeared, but the smell of antiseptic and decay remained for hours. Visitors have claimed to see a woman in a hospital gown staring out a broken window. Some believe she was a patient who never accepted her death. Others think she's something else entirely, something tied to the building itself. Though it's mostly abandoned now, Riverview hasn't gone quiet. In fact, many believe it's louder than ever. Number 2. Lakeshore Psychiatric Hospital, Toronto, Ontario. On the western edge of Toronto lies a cluster of brick buildings that once made up the Lakeshore Psychiatric Hospital. It opened in 1884 under the name Mimico Asylum and ran for more than 100 years. The hospital was designed under a moral architecture philosophy, using beautiful grounds and open space to encourage healing. But the peace didn't last. Behind its thick walls, stories of cruel treatment began to surface. Patients were isolated, mistreated, and subjected to experiments masked as therapy. Lobotomies, electroshock, over-medication. For many who entered, there was no return. When the hospital finally shut its doors in 1979, the land was transferred to Humber College. The buildings remain, repurposed for classrooms and administration, but the past refuses to stay quiet. Students and staff have reported hearing screams late at night, long after classes end. Lockers slam on their own, lights flicker even with new wiring. Some refuse to use certain hallways after dark, especially near the old tunnels that once connected the buildings underground. One former security officer reported hearing an intercom switch on in an unused building. A single word repeated 3 times, "Help," but the system had been disconnected for years. Others have seen a woman in white wandering the halls, always heading toward a door that's been permanently locked. One professor, working late, saw her pass through the window of a locked room, only to disappear as he approached. No one else had entered the building that evening. And the basement beneath the administration wing? Many say it's colder than it should be. Some staff won't go down there at all. One janitor quit after hearing a voice whisper his name from the boiler room. The hospital may have closed, but those who suffered inside never truly left. And for those walking the grounds now, they're not alone. The next hospital sits high above a city skyline, where a single locked ward was sealed off after something was found inside no one could explain. A room that has remained untouched, a place where the walls still bleed. Ready to hear about it? Let's move on. Number 3. Allen Memorial Institute, Montreal, Quebec. Perched on the slopes of Mount Royal, the Allen Memorial Institute was once a psychiatric wing of the Royal Victoria Hospital. To many in Montreal, it's just an old building with ivy-covered stone walls. But to those who know what really happened inside, it's something much darker. This hospital was ground zero for one of the most disturbing government-sponsored experiments in Canadian history. Between the 1950s and 1960s, under a CIA-funded program known as MKUltra, Dr. Ewan Cameron conducted psychological experiments on unsuspecting patients. They were given high doses of LSD, placed in drug-induced comas for weeks, and subjected to repeated messages played through speakers for hours at a time. Many never recovered, and some didn't make it out at all. Since the program ended, reports of strange activity in the building have continued to surface. Former staff say certain rooms were sealed and never reopened. Lights turn on and off by themselves. Cold spots linger even in the middle of summer, and several employees refuse to work on the top floor, claiming they heard whispering through the vents, even when no one was in the adjoining rooms. A nurse once said she heard a woman crying behind a locked treatment room door. She called security. When they unlocked it, the room was empty, except for a tape recorder sitting on the bed. It was not plugged in, and it was playing a looped voice, whispering the same sentence over and over. "You are not alone." Visitors report the sensation of being watched in the stairwells. Shadows move just out of sight. Some even say they've seen a man in a lab coat staring from the second-floor window, long after the building is closed for the night. Despite renovations, the past clings to the walls of the Allen Memorial Institute. Some say the building remembers what was done inside, and others say the people who were broken there still wander the halls. Number 4. Tranquil Sanatorium, Kamloops, British Columbia. Standing in eerie isolation near the shores of Kamloops Lake, the Tranquil Sanatorium was once a tuberculosis hospital, later converted into a mental institution. From the moment you step onto the grounds, silence hangs like a warning. The wind carries more than just dust. It carries voices. Built in the early 1900s, the facility housed patients suffering from tuberculosis, a death sentence in its time. Hundreds died within its walls, and their bodies were discreetly removed through a network of underground tunnels to avoid disturbing the living. After TB faded, the building transitioned into a psychiatric hospital, and the suffering continued. Today, the buildings sit abandoned, their walls decaying, and windows shattered. But despite its silence, Tranquil is far from empty. Paranormal investigators have recorded unexplained voices, sudden temperature drops, and loud footsteps echoing through empty halls. One of the most well-known stories comes from the underground tunnel system. A film crew shooting a horror movie there reported that their gear kept malfunctioning batteries draining within minutes, lights flickering uncontrollably. One of the crew members swore he saw a man in old hospital scrubs standing at the end of the tunnel, unmoving. When they approached, he vanished. Another frequent report comes from the upper floors of the main building. Visitors claim to hear the sound of a gurney being rolled down the corridor. When they check, there's no one there, only deep scratches in the linoleum and a single wheel mark leading into an empty room. Locals have long avoided the site. Even former staff refuse to speak about what they saw. Some believe the pain and trauma of thousands linger like a stain. Others think something was awakened in those dark corridors and never left. If you visit Tranquil Sanatorium, do not walk the tunnels alone. The dead may not speak, but in this place they respond. The next hospital sits beneath the lights of a busy city, but even in daylight, its halls are heavy. Its basement has never been fully explored, and once, a priest was called but refused to return. Ready to go deeper, or we should stop here? No, we keep going. Number 5, St. Joseph's Hospital, Hamilton, Ontario. St. Joseph's Hospital has a long-standing reputation for excellent care, but deep within its aging walls are whispers of something far more unsettling. Staff working the night shift have reported hearing old-fashioned gurneys rolling through empty hallways. Elevators operate on their own, stopping at floors no one requested. Several employees have encountered a woman in a hospital gown standing silently near the surgical ward. When approached, she vanishes without a trace. Security footage once caught a door opening and closing repeatedly for several minutes, with no one nearby and no mechanical fault ever found. Some say the haunting stems from its psychiatric unit, long closed, where aggressive treatment methods were once used. Cold spots and muffled crying are often reported in that section of the building, even though it's been sealed off for years. Whatever lingers here, it does not rest easy, and those who work late sometimes feel watched. Number 6. Whitby Psychiatric Hospital, Whitby, Ontario. The ruins of the Whitby Psychiatric Hospital sit quietly, but their history screams through the empty halls. Opened in 1916, it was once a self-sustaining institution with underground tunnels connecting buildings. Many of those tunnels are still sealed, and for good reason. Former patients and staff have reported seeing shadowy figures standing motionless in abandoned wings. Paranormal investigators captured a woman's voice whispering, "Still here," in the main building that was shut down in the 1990s. Even outside the grounds, local residents say they can hear the sound of clanging doors echoing in the night. Cold spots are common, electronics malfunction, and visitors describe a sudden pressure on their chest, like someone is standing on them, even when alone. Those who have explored deeper say the walls themselves seem to hum a low, vibrating sound that grows louder the longer you stay. There's a section of the grounds the locals won't go near. No one really knows what happened there, but animals avoid it completely. Some say it's just a part of the land that never settled. And just when you think you've seen everything, something shifts in the corner of your eye. A quick flash, a shape, and then nothing but the real terror. Some of the tunnels have reopened themselves, and no one knows what came out. Now, what waits down the next hallway is colder and closer. Number 7. Douglas Hospital, Verdun, Quebec. Tucked away near the banks of the St. Lawrence River, Douglas Hospital has long been a fixture in Quebec's mental health care system. But what lies behind its red brick walls goes beyond psychiatry and medicine. Built in the late 1800s, the facility's original purpose was to house those deemed mentally unfit, often with outdated and cruel treatments. Staff members have reported disembodied voices echoing through sealed-off wings. One nurse recalled hearing footsteps pacing in a locked corridor, only to open the door and find the air icy and the hallway empty. In another case, a security guard claimed to have seen an apparition in a patient gown drift past the elevator, only for the power to cut out seconds later. Patients in recovery wards have spoken of an old woman watching them from the foot of their beds. She never speaks, just stands there, night after night, fading into the walls before dawn. Some believe she was a patient who died during an unauthorized treatment session, her body lost in the shuffle of crumbling records. Perhaps most disturbing are the elevators. Occasionally, they descend to the basement level on their own, a level that has been out of use for decades. Those who investigate find only darkness and the feeling of being followed. Staff turnover in certain wards is unusually high, and the psychiatric wing where shock therapy was once performed remains permanently closed after a patient allegedly walked into a sealed room and was never found again. The building still functions as a modern hospital today, but some say the past never left. Number 8. Edmonton General Hospital, now Goodwill, Edmonton, Alberta. Edmonton General began serving the public in 1890 and operated as a full hospital for over 120 years. A wide variety of patients passed through its hallways: trauma victims, psychiatric cases, epidemic sufferers, and many of them never left. The building later transitioned to mixed commercial use, including community services, but the history embedded in its walls remains very much alive. Employees now working in the renovated towers still report unexplained encounters tied to its past. One program coordinator described how she would occasionally hear coughing and footfalls echoing through the long corridors, footsteps that stopped abruptly outside rooms already closed for the night. She walked toward the sound and found the hallway completely empty. Facilities staff have noted sudden temperature drops in meeting rooms, even when HVAC systems blindly indicate normal levels. One maintenance worker felt a cold breeze brush past his ear near the old isolation wing. When he checked the adjacent units, every door was locked and no occupant registered. A volunteer once reported seeing a small shadow move across her peripheral vision in what used to be the tuberculosis ward. Concerned, she turned to see if someone was there, but only found the echoing emptiness of a corridor length lit by outdated lighting that still hums at night. Perhaps most unsettling is the persistent tapping inside sealed offices above the basement. Despite their being vacant and inaccessible, someone or something knocks rhythmically on the walls late into the evening. Tapping recorded on camera shows no visible source and yet continues for hours. The hospital reopened under community use and no longer offers medical care, but many employees swear the occupants of the past are still on shift. This place doesn't just carry memory, it echoes with the presence of those who stayed too long. Number 9. Charles Camsell Hospital, Edmonton, Alberta. The Charles Camsell Hospital, once a tuberculosis sanatorium and later a general hospital, is one of Edmonton's most feared and avoided abandoned buildings. Originally operated by the federal government for Indigenous patients, its long and often tragic history has left behind something far more disturbing than crumbling walls. Locals and urban explorers speak of voices in the darkness, the sound of heavy footsteps echoing down empty hallways, and strange cold spots that seem to move. Some have reported hearing moans or whispered crying coming from the upper floors, despite the building being completely sealed off and deserted. Former staff recall elevators moving on their own and lights flickering even when no one else was around. A security guard once admitted he quit after seeing the silhouette of a woman in a hospital gown staring out from a third-floor window. He claimed she remained perfectly still even after he shouted up to her. Indigenous communities have long considered the building to be spiritually charged, and many believe that unresolved suffering lingers within the structure. Some elders refuse to go near the site, convinced that the spirits of mistreated patients still walk its halls, searching for justice or simply a way out. Even now, years after its closure, police still receive reports of people hearing screams or seeing figures in the windows. But when officers arrive, they find the building tightly boarded and empty. It may no longer operate as a hospital, but the Charles Camsell building still holds on to something that refuses to be forgotten. And those who enter often leave with stories they can't explain and a sense that something is still watching them. Number 10. Hotel Dieu Hospital, Kingston, Ontario. Hotel Dieu Hospital in Kingston is one of Canada's oldest healthcare institutions, established in the 19th century. Its corridors have witnessed generations of births, deaths, and countless hours of suffering. But behind the walls of this historic building, something remains unsettled. Staff and visitors have reported long, dark shadows gliding across floors after visiting hours, figures too tall to be mistaken for anyone inside. Patients staying overnight on the older wings speak of waking to see a nurse standing at the foot of their beds, dressed in early 1900s uniform. When questioned, the staff say no night nurse wears that garb anymore. One former maintenance worker shared a chilling story. He responded to a call on the second floor and heard a faint melody playing on a baby piano in the nursery room, even though the facility has long since removed that instrument. When he entered, only silence and an empty, dusty room remained. Occasionally, electronics in older rooms will flicker or cut out entirely, even though the circuits are intact. Visitors then report a sudden chill, the faint scent of antiseptic, followed by whispered voices calling out names they no longer remember. Even public tours sometimes falter when groups reach the original chapel section of the hospital. Tour guides recount strange feedback in microphones, and several visitors have claimed to feel a cold hand graze their shoulder, though the sound system showed no signs of malfunction. Though Hotel Dieu continues to serve the community, many admit to avoiding certain wings after dusk, and those who have spent time on the upper floors often describe the presence as watchful, rather than hostile, quiet, but unmistakable. Number 11. Rockwood Asylum, Kingston, Ontario. Rockwood Asylum, also known as the Rockwood Lunatic Asylum, opened in 1862 to house the criminally insane. Situated near Lake Ontario, the imposing stone building towers over the shore. Though officially closed in 2000, its architecture and atmosphere remain unchanged and chilling. During its years of operation, patients were subjected to brutal treatments, bloodletting, isolation, chaining, and experimental restraints. Overcrowding and neglect were common, and many died in their cells. Today the building stands empty, yet witnesses say it continues to echo that trauma. Urban explorers and local residents report strange activity. Footsteps reverberate down long hallways when no one is present. Some see figures in old-fashioned clothing pacing behind windows, only to vanish when approached. Darkness in the basements feels suffocating, and whispers are said to float through empty rooms. One explorer shared that while taking photographs in a locked ward, his camera flashed unexpectedly, capturing nothing at first glance. After reviewing the images later, he found a faint outline of a man standing by the doorway. Security confirmed no one was inside at the time. Another visitor reported a persistent humming sound in the chapel area. It resembled an old ventilation system, but there was no equipment. The sound ended suddenly, as if someone had pulled a plug. Local historians believe the building's abandoned state has preserved its memory, and perhaps the spirits attached to it. Some say the asylum itself acts as a container for unrest, rather than releasing it. What makes Rockwood particularly disturbing is its patient population. Many inmates were uncharged or untreated and stayed until death. Their final screams and pleas, some say, remain embedded in the structure. This is not just a haunted building, it is a monument to suffering. Number 12. Fort St. Sanatorium, Fort Qu'Appelle, Saskatchewan. Opened in 1917 as a tuberculosis treatment facility, Fort St. Sanatorium sits above Echo Lake in Saskatchewan. At its peak, it treated hundreds of patients suffering from the White Plague, a disease that often meant slow, painful death. Many never left, and according to those who visit today, some still haven't. When the hospital closed in the 1970s, it was converted into an art school. That's when strange reports escalated. Students and staff claimed to hear coughing in empty rooms, footsteps pacing behind locked doors, and the sound of gurney wheels echoing across the tiled floors. One chilling incident involved a janitor who refused to return after seeing a translucent woman in a nurse's uniform glide down the hallway and vanish into a wall. Others say that late at night a cold wind moves through the halls, and with it, the scent of antiseptic and blood. The old morgue is said to be the most active. Visitors have reported hearing whispers, the clicking of surgical tools, and feeling watched as soon as they enter. Some have captured unexplained images, blurs of light, or faces peering through glass panels where no one was present. Locals claim the building is cursed. Former tuberculosis patients were often isolated, terrified and abandoned. Many died alone, and some say their last emotions, fear, anger, desperation, still echo through the decaying walls. Fort San is now closed to the public, but those who've been inside say it never really let them go. Next is a psychiatric hospital that once housed society's most disturbed. Decades later, its padded cells and medical wings remain, but something else lingers too. Number 13. Weyburn Mental Hospital, Weyburn, Saskatchewan. Once known as the Saskatchewan Hospital, the Weyburn Mental Hospital opened in 1921 and quickly gained a dark reputation. It was one of the largest psychiatric facilities in Canada and also one of the most controversial. Over the decades, Weyburn became infamous for its use of experimental treatments, electroshock therapy, insulin comas, sensory deprivation, and even LSD trials during the 1950s. Many of the patients who underwent these procedures never recovered. Some never made it out alive. When the hospital was shut down in the 1970s, the building was left to decay, but that didn't quiet the disturbances within. Former staff and trespassers report extreme unease inside the ruins, cold spots, disembodied screams, and shadows that move on their own. Several have described the overwhelming sensation of being watched, especially in the basement level, where the most intense treatments were performed. Doors slam without warning, lights flicker in areas without power, and some say they've seen the apparition of a man in a straitjacket, staring through broken windows, mouth open in a silent scream. One urban explorer claimed to hear rhythmic tapping behind a sealed door. When they played back their recording, a voice whispered, "Let me out." Security guards who once patrolled the site at night refuse to go near it now. Many left their shifts early, shaken by the constant presence of something they couldn't explain. The Weyburn site has since been demolished, but the stories didn't stop. Locals say the ground itself feels wrong. They avoid it, especially after dark, because although the building is gone, what happened there left a scar, and whatever lingered inside never needed walls to remain. Coming up is a hospital where fire did more than destroy. It awakened something that refuses to rest. Number 14. Sunnybrook Veterans Centre, Toronto, Ontario. Located on the grounds of Sunnybrook Health Sciences Centre, the Veterans Centre was constructed in the 1950s to care for military veterans. Over decades, thousands passed through seeking treatment for physical and mental injuries. Family members, staff and visitors now describe the building as haunted by echoes of trauma and service. Several visitors report hearing hushed conversations and distant laughter in rooms that should be vacant. Staff working night shifts in the East Wing speak of elevators operating on their own, going from floor to floor without being called. One nurse described entering an unlocked patient room late at night, only to find it empty, yet noticeably colder. Moments later, she saw a man in an old uniform standing by the window. He turned, but had no face, just a dark blur before vanishing. In the chapel, memorial services still take place, but attendees sometimes report hearing footsteps in closed-off sections. Security footage has captured shadowy figures walking calmly through empty corridors. There is a particular room where a veteran once lived for years. After he passed, nurses noticed his bed set neatly each day, as if he had made it himself. When asked, no one could explain it. Though Sunnybrook is a functioning healthcare centre, many avoid that wing after dark. The past still walks among the living there. Number 15. Richmond General Hospital, Richmond, Ontario. Richmond General began serving the community in the early 1900s and later became part of a larger hospital network before closing in the late 20th century. Though now defunct, it remains notorious among paranormal investigators and local ghost hunters. Staff and historians reported a nurse in the 1960s who encountered a pale, perfumed woman in the basement corridors. The figure was later said to be the ghost of a former patient who died in the building. The scent, cold spot and pale reflection appeared repeatedly to others over the years. Since the hospital's closure, people exploring the site have experienced doors opening on their own, whispering voices in empty rooms, flickering lights without power, and apparitions appearing near old patient wards. Some rooms seem to hold cold air longer than others, another frequent indicator of paranormal presence. The hospital's history includes multiple unexplained patient deaths, staff disappearances, and rumors of hidden patient records. These dark elements fuel ongoing speculation that something restless still moves through its corridors. You've walked corridors loaded with sorrow, rooms filled with regrets, and wards that never truly emptied. These hospitals were built to save lives, but in many cases, they became prisons for spirits that never moved on. If you've ever visited one of these places, or felt a shadow linger after leaving a medical facility, do share it in the comments. We read them all. Which hospital made you feel something cold brush by your shoulder? Which story unsettled you the most? Please like, share and subscribe, because next time we're exploring haunted places that defy explanation, where no doors lead out and the darkness inside is not confined to hospitals. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and listen, because sometimes the walls speak louder than the living.